So we're here today with Pavlina Tcherneva, who is a professor of economics at Franklin and Marshall College. And she's one of our INET grantees for a really very, I think, important grant called Reorienting Fiscal Policy, a Bottom-Up Approach. Welcome, Pavlina.
Thank you.
Now, I've read your proposal, and what you're proposing is a more direct approach to trying to deal with unemployment problems. So, but partly this is a critique or maybe a response to the failure or weakness of the kinds of things that have been done to try to address the unemployment problem in the United States, which you call the trickle-down approach. I've heard trickle-down in other, this is a new use of trickle-down. So maybe you want to begin by just explaining that, what you mean by trickle-down.
Certainly, yes. We normally associate trickle-down economics with cutting top marginal tax rates. But what I argue in this project is that the way conventional fiscal policy tends to work, what we call aggregate demand management, also works through a type of trickle-down mechanism. Essentially, what we attempt to do is to prime the pump, stimulate growth, where employment is a byproduct of growth. In the current context, unemployment or employment seems to be a bit of an afterthought. It's a consequence of growth, and the approach doesn't seem to deliver the job creation that we need. But then I also argue that there is a second kind of trickle down that works through heterogeneous labor markets, where the boost in aggregate demand, whether it's private or public, tends to improve the employment and income conditions always of those at the top of the income distribution. And then demand is expected to trickle down from their demand for product to the lower skilled and least skilled.
The people who are unemployed.
Essentially the ones that are first fired and last hired, but that demand never quite trickles down.
Now we're speaking today, this is in November of 2011, where unemployment is 9.1%, and has been for a while in the aftermath of this crisis. Yeah. Is this event what has stimulated you to do this grant and do this research, or is this a longer standing project?
I have thought about these issues for a very long time. I think that this is a really opportune time to reassess the role and place of fiscal policy, because we really have only two visions for fiscal policy. We have the conventional aggregate demand management approach, and when that doesn't seem to deliver the results that we need, naturally, the public and policymakers tend to turn to the other alternative, which is austerity. So we don't really have a third way of thinking about what fiscal policy is and what it should do. And I have thought the problem of unemployment is a problem even in good times. Even in the Clinton years, I thought that precarious employment was an issue that had to be studied and should be addressed. So I would say probably since my college years, I have been working on employment issues.
It's a funny sort of position. In a way, you're anti-Keynesian, or at least what people usually mean by the word Keynesian is in fact aggregate demand management of this kind. But you're also anti-supply side, I guess. So what is your third way?
Well, I want to call myself in the original Keynesian spirit rather than anti-Keynesian. We conventionally tend to think of aggregate demand management as Keynesian policy, but we've inherited this model from the ISLM framework and that formulation, original formulation, which has some difficulties in representing the original Keynesian message. And I have studied that sort of political economy, and have always been struck that if at the theoretical level we haven't fully captured the Keynesian message, then that has to be the case at the policy level as well. And so recently I had gone back to the original policy papers and gone through all the collected writings of Keynes to see exactly what it is that he meant by fiscal policy. But we have to update the Keynesian message for the current environment and for the modern problems that we have. And so I do take some inspiration from him in formulating a more direct approach to fiscal policy in the form of direct employment at all phases of the business cycle.
So this is this bottom-up approach
Yes.
that you say. So what exactly is this?
So a bottom-up approach is essentially going to the root of the problem. It is unemployment. At least one of the problems to deal with is unemployment. The other is income inequality. So what we, through fiscal policy that would target those at the bottom of the income distribution by improving their jobs and incomes, then we would also improve the income distribution while improving employment. So a bottom-up approach, in my view, is rather than employment being a consequence of growth, that growth is a consequence of a pro-employment policy, where policy delivers direct employment effects and also secondary employment effects.
And also hits exactly the people who are unemployed,
Exactly.
which is your other point. Now, so really, you are an interesting hybrid of sort of policy advocacy and academic research. You sort of wear those two hats. How does that work? It's a way of being an economist, but it's not a usual way of being an economist, I think.
Yes, I've always found the possibility of talking to policymakers very appealing. I see my role as somebody who doesn't just produce knowledge, but also produces knowledge for use. My primary interest is to teach and to do research, but I hope that along the way I can also be actively involved in one way or another with some policy making and formulation.
So this kind of work, where does this come from in your life? If you look back, when did you, I don't know, decide you wanted to do this particular kind of work, or when did you decide to become an economist in the first place, or where does it come from?
Yeah, I think it's a natural progression. I mean, most of the issues that I work on today the seeds were planted even in my college years. I mean, I remember reading the general theory in college, which is not typical. I had, I suppose, inspiring faculty, professors who sort of captured my imagination.
Now, this was at Gettysburg College.
Gettysburg College,
which is a small liberal arts college.
Small liberal arts institution, yes. And it was my senior thesis that actually focused on the issue of both full employment, but also government spending. And from then on, it was really a natural progression of just meeting scholars that did similar research.
I was noticing in your CV that you were for a while the associate director of something called the Center for Full Employment.
That was before I began my graduate studies. When I was a college student, I had an internship opportunity where I actually worked for practitioner, an investment banker, but with active academic interests. And actually through that internship experience, I met many scholars that worked on issues of full employment. And as a consequence, this center was born, the Center for Full Employment and Price Stability.
Where is this center?
At the University of Missouri, Kansas City. It's quite instrumental in bringing in a lot of faculty to the department at the University of Missouri in Kansas City, where I decided then to pursue my PhD because I was working with people I would have liked to work anyhow.
So then you get your PhD in 2008, and I see you now work at Franklin and Marshall, which is, I guess, a liberal arts college, similar to Gettysburg?
Very similar.
What's it like to be on the other side of the lectern? Are you having your students read Keynes' general theory?
I do, yes.
You do?
I make them read Keynes in the original, yes, and go through chapter line by line.
Yeah.
It's not easy going, but I think I have to say that I have been really, really pleasantly surprised by the overwhelmingly positive response by students.
Now, is this in a history of economic thought class, or is this in a macroeconomics class, or a
Actually,
senior seminar, or what is the context?
It is a senior seminar on macroeconomics where we study both Keynes and Minsky. And the point is to study the investment theory of the business cycle and then a financial theory of investment by Hyman Minsky. So the first half is a theoretical with heavy emphasis on theory, and the second half is then on policy issues. How do we apply what we have learned to understanding the world around us today? So it is a seminar base with lots of reading, lots of discussion and engagement.
Well, this is a very interesting way of being an economist. I'm really glad to have met you, and glad you could join us here today. And welcome also to our stable of INET economists.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.